Newsday continues here on One News Now Business. I'm Danny Laurel, and here are the biggest stories on the economic and corporate fronts. The Agriculture Department has temporarily banned the importation of some products from two countries. This ban covers domestic and wild birds and their products, including poultry, meat, and eggs from Turkey. The DA said this is due to an outbreak of avian influenza in the country. The entry of live cattle and related products from the Netherlands has also been prohibited. The DA explained that there is a reported outbreak of the mad cow disease. This importation ban takes effect immediately and shall remain enforced unless revoked in writing. The government loses around 500 billion pesos a year due to tax evasion. That is according to a top official at the Bureau of Internal Revenue. BIR Commissioner Romeo Lumagi says the government loses up to 100 billion pesos from the illicit trade of cigarettes alone. Those losses climb to 500 billion pesos when leakages of petroleum and vape products are factored in. Lumagi says the Bureau would have an easier time meeting its targets if it addresses tax evasion. Now, earlier this month, the Bureau also filed 74 tax evasion complaints worth 3.5 billion pesos against several individuals and companies. Now, in a bid to meet its 2.6 trillion peso target revenue collection for the year, the BIR is also investigating a number of suspected tax evaders. The country's balance of payments widened to its biggest surplus in more than 2 years in the month of January. Data from the Bangko Sentral showed a BOP surplus of $3.08 billion last month. That's a reversal from the $102 million shortfall in January of 2022. Now, last month's figure was also higher than the $612 million surplus recorded in December of 2022. This was also the largest surplus in 26 months or since December 2020. The Bangko Sentral said last month's BOP position reflected the proceeds of the government's global bond issuance and the central bank's profit from investments abroad. Economists said stronger cash remittances and more tourist arrivals may have also contributed to the surplus. The BOP gives a glimpse into the country's transactions with the rest of the world. A deficit means more funds left the Philippines, while a surplus shows that more money came in. Now, we'll be back with more stories after the break. Keep it here on One News. You're still watching One News Now. I'm Danny Laurel. Fitch Solutions now expects the benchmark interest rate to peak at 6.5% in the first half of this year. This updated forecast is higher than Fitch's earlier projection of 6%. Fitch sees the tightening cycle to continue due to persistent high inflation. Last week, the Bangko Sentral raised the key interest rate by another half a point to a near 16-year high of 6%. BSP Governor Felipe Medalla earlier told Bloomberg that another hike with a size of 25 to 50 basis points is possible for next month. The BSP has been increasing rates as prices continue to soar. In January, inflation surged to a fresh 14-year high of 8.7%. The National Telecommunications Commission sees slow progress in SIM registration. The NTC reported that only around 19% out of 167 million subscribers have so far registered their SIM cards. The agency said poor signal in remote areas and complacency are among the reasons behind the slow turnout. Now with this, telecommunication companies are working to provide hundreds of assistance areas or centers in various areas. Now, some Netflix users can now enjoy binge watching for less as the streaming platform announced a region-wide update to some of its subscription plans. Now, starting February 21st, users on a basic plan will only have to pay 249 pesos a month for their subscription. That's from the previous 369 pesos. And those subscribed to a standard plan, on the other hand, will have their monthly fees reduced from 459 pesos to 399 pesos. Netflix users on a mobile and premium plan, however, will see the monthly fees at 149 pesos and 549 pesos respectively. New members who will sign up will see the new prices immediately starting February 21st. Existing members, on the other hand, will be notified by email as the update rolls out over the coming weeks from their next billing cycle. Now, Metro Pacific Investments Corporation is looking to carve a place in the local agriculture sector. That's as the company announced its plan to build the largest greenhouse facility in the Philippines. Dubbed Metro Pacific Fresh Farms, the 22-hectare property in San Rafael, Bulacan will produce yearly 1,600 metric tons of vegetables once the modern greenhouses are finished. That's in 12 months. The greenhouse facility will use modern technologies such as hydroponics and drip irrigation systems, which will result in a 90% reduction in water usage, a 90% reduction in land usage, and a 90 to 99% reduction in the use of fertilizers and pesticides. MPIC Chairman Manny V. Pangilinan said the group hopes to build a sustainable food business while helping the country achieve food security.
You add to the food supply available to people, right? If there are more vegetables available, 1,600 tons more vegetables each year, and this is just a start, I would hope that the laws of supply and demand should push down prices.
It's not going to be expensive, that's what you mean, no? So, as I said, we'll make sure the prices are affordable, and we'll make sure that we're able to increase the supply of vegetables, principally for Metro Manila, no?
And on to some global updates. U.S. President Joe Biden made an unannounced visit to Kyiv on Monday, promising to stand with the Ukraine as long as it takes. The trip was timed to upstage the Kremlin ahead of the one-year anniversary of Russia's invasion. Biden promised new military aid for the Ukraine worth $500 million during that visit. He said additional sanctions would be announced this week against the Russian elite and companies. Officials in Washington and Moscow notified Russia before Biden's departure to avoid the risk of an attack on Kyiv while he was there. The trip took place a day before Putin was due to make a major address on Tuesday.
Putin thought Ukraine was weak and the West was divided. He's counting on us not sticking together. He was counting on the inability to keep NATO united. He was counting on us not to be able to bring in others on the side of Ukraine. He thought he could outlast us. I don't think he's thinking that right now. But he's just been plain wrong. Plain wrong. And 1 year later, the evidence is right here in this room. We stand here together.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he and Biden spoke about long-range weapons, as well as, quote, weapons that may still be supplied to Ukraine, even though it wasn't supplied before. But Zelensky did not detail any new commitments. He noted, though, that negotiations were very fruitful.
We can and we must take this year, 2023, the year of victory. And I want to emphasize that this unprovoked and criminal Russian war against Ukraine, the whole of Europe, and the democratic world must end with the clearing of all Ukrainian land from Russian occupation and firm guarantees of long-term security for both our country and the whole Europe and the whole world.
And that's how long we're going to be with you, Mr. President, for as long as it takes.
We'll do it.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, China's top diplomat Wang Yi is set to visit Moscow in the coming days after floating a fresh peace proposal to help end the war in Ukraine. Meanwhile, China's official Xinhua news agency published an article on Monday that lays out Beijing's sweeping view of how the U.S. misbehaves on the world stage. John Liu reports for us on Bloomberg Television.
So China seems to be trying to position itself as maybe a broker, a global statesman in this whole Ukraine war. Is there any indication here that their support for Moscow is wavering?
I'm not sure that the support is wavering. We haven't seen any substantial signs of that. Throughout the war, China's tried to play this role of seemingly a neutral player in everything, but still actually backing Russia in many substantial ways, rhetorically, at the United Nations, in various other ways around the world. We haven't got the details of this new peace plan, but we do expect it in many ways to echo what Russia has wanted out of a ceasefire. We do expect there to be a call to stop arms deliveries to Ukraine. That would be something that the Russia would have wanted. And so I think it will be rather difficult for Beijing to convince, especially the West, that it is a neutral broker in this situation.
The timing is interesting, isn't it? Because, I think the skeptics will say it's very difficult to go from a, zero constraints friendship with Russia to be seen as some sort of neutral actor who can broker a peace deal. But why is Beijing doing this? Have the costs of being on one side rather than the other changed?
So there was an article published by Bloomberg Opinion yesterday. I love the headline. It said, China is not fighting in Ukraine, but it is losing. And I think that's the situation Beijing finds itself in. Around the world, I think the opinion of China has been degraded by its support of Russia and this war. I think the peace plan is an effort on Beijing's part to try and show that it is trying to do its part to end the conflict. But as we said before, it continues to rhetorically, publicly support Russia, and that is going to be a hurdle in terms of its relationship with the U.S. especially, but also Europe, important.
And it just goes to show that there's just so many other issues beyond just this balloon that is really weighing on this relationship still, John.
Well, I think President Biden's visit to Kiev this week really underlines how much of a priority Ukraine is for the United States. When we did have that meeting between Wang Yi and Secretary Blinken took the opportunity, obviously they spoke about the balloon, but also importantly, he took the opportunity to warn again Beijing not to cross this red line of providing arms to Russia. And so a lot of the relationship, a lot of the tension between the United States and China and all that impacts around the world is based on this conflict in Ukraine.
John, what are the prospects of getting back to the level of optimism that we had in that Bali meeting? Because it does feel, and I think, Yvonne alludes to this, is try as they might, there are myriad issues that stand in the way of Washington and Beijing being able to improve this relationship.
I think it will be very difficult for the two countries to improve the relationship, especially in the short term. I think there's just too much on the table that the two sides need to go through. We are expecting a call between Presidents Biden and Xi. President Biden said he would call Xi Jinping to discuss and try to temper the tensions that have resulted from the balloon incident. But beyond the balloon, beyond Ukraine, we still have potentially a visit by U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy to Taiwan. You'll remember when Nancy Pelosi visited, how much tension, how much of an uproar that caused. And so we could expect, again, more turbulence in the relationship going forward.
Yeah, this 4,000 sort of word article from Xinhua blasting the U.S. for military cultural hegemony. I mean, I'm guessing you've read this whole piece. John, what was the biggest takeaway from that?
I will admit I have not read it in its entirety, but I think it is a complaint. It is a complaint that Beijing has voiced several times in the past. Essentially, China feels like it is being constrained by the United States. This containment strategy to stop China's rise economically, politically, militarily. And that is at the core of this dispute between the U.S. and China. Essentially, what sort of China is the United States willing to live with? How powerful of a China? And would China accept that role? Would China accept that a state in the world order that the U.S. is willing to give China?
And for more updates, visit News 5, the Philippine Star, and Business World online. Visit our website, onenews.ph, for more in-depth analysis. You can also catch One News on the Signal Play app. Register for a free account. That's at www.signalplay.com and stream One News Live anytime, anywhere. I'm Danny Laurel. Join us again at 2 p.m. We are One News, all sides, all the time.